Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. It is June 9th, and I am happy to be here. We are continuing our ongoing series, working on an urban fantasy rom-com with the assistance of Laterpress's story tools. My name is Nate. I am the marketing and community lead for Laterpress, and every one of these videos is put in sequence in a playlist to make it easy to start from the beginning and catch up if you happen to not be able to catch any of these live. We're at one of the pivotal moments in the book, the inciting incident here. Our main characters, Eddie and Tessa, have been matched up through a magical dating app that boasts a greater than 90% satisfaction rate in matching people for long-term relationships. But our couple both have some baggage to go through, which they unload on each other with both barrels during their first date. So instead of it being a great first date, it is an absolute disaster. Things blow up, and the dating app is going to trap them in a 60-second time loop, forcing them to interact with each other more until they realize that the app was not wrong. They really are a great match for each other. So the app functions kind of, sort of, as a pseudo antagonist. It will behave antagonistically, but its heart is ultimately in a good place. We are in the back half of this now. Last week on Friday, we started the front half of this chapter. This chapter is the longest in the book so far. It's 5,891 words currently, and that is after some trimming has already taken place. My style is to read through the generated text and bold things that I would want to go back into and dive into some more. I also underlined this paragraph because I think I'm going to delete that entirely. But we didn't get deep into the weeds with this last week. We worked on refining the beat about what was going to happen in this sequence, and then split it into 2 scene cards to handle a load of writing all of that, and then generated all of it, and then read and audited the first half. So today the plan is going to be to get through the back half of this chapter, and then with any time remaining after that, start going through and making some deeper edits. And then next week, no, not next week, today's Tuesday, on Friday, digging into the start of the first time loop and working through the plan on how to approach those loops, trying to think through how many loops are necessary, because I started writing the beginning chapters of the book without nailing down the full plot. So that one will probably be a very plot-heavy stream, working with AI to refine the next several beats to probably pin down how many time loops there should be and what happens in each loop to get things ready for later streams. That's kind of the weekly plan here. I'm going to zoom in on this more so the text is larger on screen. Actually, let's see here. Oh, I didn't want browser settings. I want here, if I go full page. Okay, so we can call any distractions. So here's the second scene card, but to quickly set the stage. So they meet and they sit down, and Eddie is immediately hyper intense because he deals with the dead and their regrets for a living, and that has made him hyper, like, not want to ever leave anything unsaid. So he comes on too strong and too intense for people. So he's doing that. Tessa is a therapist for familiars, and when he comes on strong, she starts to fall back to her comfort zone of therapy speak and diagnoses him, as if it starts thinking about him as if he was a client, and is, treating him like a client in a therapy session more than a date. And so things have been kind of going off the rails a little bit. They have a moment of connection while bread arrives. So we are at a moment. We ended last Friday's stream with a moment where things were okay between them and it had stabilized for a minute. And now we're gonna ruin it again. Eddie leaned forward. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. A tilt of his torso across the table, his bread forgotten, his eyes bright with the particular intensity of a man who just felt something click and cannot resist the urge to name it. Tessa saw it coming the way she might see a wave breaking offshore, the gathering momentum, the crest, the inevitable break. Can I say something? He said. You've been saying things all evening. All right, I think this would be another spot to call some writing in the name of pacing. I always like having too much writing as opposed to not enough to start, because it's pretty easy to prune things versus adding in things to flesh out gaps and fill in for any moments that need more time. Can I say something? We've been saying a lot of thing. You've been saying a lot of things all evening. This is good, actually. Kind of a clap back to his attitude. I'm underlining it because I think if I don't leave it alone, I might actually leave it alone, but I might add in here some internal monologue on her thoughts about how this date is going. That's the sort of thing I would make a decision on when I'm doing a nitty-gritty deeper dive into a chapter as a whole versus just auditing what moments I need to take a look at. Fair, he grinned, and the grin was disarming in a way that made Tessa's fingers tighten around her sourdough. This, right now, the bread, the transit rant, the dandelion cat story. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is the real stuff. He gestured between them with one hand, a motion that encompassed the table, the bread basket, the scorch-free tablecloth, the entire fragile architecture of the last 90 seconds. I feel like we have a real connection. So this is one thing where, because it's picking up, technically this is a different scene, even though it's the same chapter, because I used 2 scene cards to break all of this down. There is some repetition where it's recapping what just came before. So this would be a spot where I would cut. I feel like we have a real connection. The words landed on the table between them like a glass set down too hard. Inside the tote bag, Artemis's nascent purr stopped. Tessa felt it happen, the warm, unguarded thing in her chest seizing up, contracting, reacting, or retreating behind the familiar barricade of analysis as if someone had pulled the fire alarm in a building that wasn't burning. 30 seconds ago, the connection he was describing had been right there, alive and breathing. I think she could feel in the looseness of her shoulders and the crookedness of her smile, but his naming it out loud had changed its molecular structure. It was no longer a feeling, it was declaration, and declarations required responses, and responses required certainty, and certainty was one thing Tessa could not manufacture on demand, no matter how many frameworks she'd stack between herself and the world. It's been a nice evening, she said. This is not working for me. I'm going to try to use the free form from Opus 4.6. Sure. Okay. This section of text feels overwritten. Prune it down. Tessa is alarmed in this moment that Eddie is coming on too strong again. And I've only used the selected text, so we'll see what I get because I haven't put in the entire, I don't want to feed it the entire chapter so far. That's me being lazy. Yeah, but if I wanted better results, I probably would. Okay, so that it is shorter. And more direct. I'm going to bold that because I might want to massage that some more. It's been a nice evening, she said. She heard the words leave her mouth and recognized them for what they were, a door closing, not slamming. She never slammed, but clicking shut with the quiet, definitive precision of a lock engaging. We don't need it. Eddie's face did something complicated. The brightness didn't vanish, but it rearranged itself the way lights shifted when a cloud passes. He sat back, not all the way back, not a full retreat of a man who'd given up, but enough that the distance between them, which had been shrinking over bread and transit complaints, reasserted himself. Yeah, and then this dialogue might need some tweaks too. A nice evening, he repeated. I'm having a good time. That's not what I said. I know. This is also, I put in some style notes, but I don't know that's meeting them. I feel like we have a connection that's different from a nice evening. A nice evening is what you have when a nice evening is what you have with your dentist when the cleaning goes well. No. No, no, no. No. Tessa reached for her water glass. I think it's important not to assign too much narrative weight to early interactions. There's a well documented tendency to conflate novelty with compatibility, especially in high stimulus environments. We're falling back into therapy speech again, which is befitting her character, but I think we're trying too hard. She gestured vaguely at the floating candles, the enchanted ceiling, the invisible string quartet. The setting is designed to amplify emotional resonance. It's worth being mindful of that. Eddie stared at her. Do you just call our date a high stimulus environment? I'm saying that the context matters. And I'm saying that I like you, and you just responded with a peer reviewed disclaimer. Again, he can recognize, he's perfectly capable of recognizing the therapy speech for what it is. I would choose a different response there. From the tote bag, so quiet that only Tessa could hear, he's got you there. Tessa pressed her lips together and did not look at the bag. The server arrived with her entrees, pan-seared something for Tessa, a braised something else for Eddie. What is this laziness? I've never seen it be lazy like that with details before. That's a first. And the choreography of placement and pepper offerings provided a merciful interruption. Tessa arranged her silverware. Eddie thanked the server with a warmth that struck Tessa as both genuine and slightly performative, the kind of graciousness that wanted to be witnessed. She caught herself cataloging it and felt a spike of frustration at him, at herself, at the relentless machinery of her own perception that wouldn't let her simply eat dinner without generating a case file. That is a little more self-awareness than I think she should display at this point in the story, so I'm going to highlight that. Eddie cut into his entree with the focused energy of a man redirecting emotion into a physical task. He chewed, he swallowed, he set the fork down. Can I ask you something honestly? You've been asking me things honestly all night. Do you actually want to be here? The question was quiet, stripped of its emotional or stripped of its earlier intensity, and it landed harder for it. Tessa looked at him across the table, at his dark eyes, his slightly loosened tie, the way his jaw held tension he probably didn't know was visible. So again, here's the rule of three that we need to be mindful of. One is his dark eyes. Two is his loosened tie. Three, the way his jaw held tension. You can do this. The AI uses that technique more often than the average human writer is going to. I always say pick your spots. This would not be one of those spots. The answer split inside her like light through a prism. Yes and no, and I don't know how to want something without actually being terrified of it. All existed simultaneously, and what came out of her mouth was none of them. I think we have very different approaches to getting to know someone. Ed nodded slowly. Eddie, yeah, I'm getting that. He picked up his fork again. Tessa picked up hers. They ate in a silence that was not comfortable and not hostile, but something worse, resigned. Correct idea, not how I would phrase it, so I'll probably just tweak that a bit. Mutual recognition of two people who had each independently and with complete conviction arrived at the same conclusion. Tessa studied him through her lashes as she ate. The intensity hadn't diminished. It never would, she suspected. It was structural, load bearing, the thing that held him up. Even now, in the quiet, she could feel it radiating off of him like heat from pavement. He wanted things too much. He reached too fast. He would barrel into her life with the full force of his enormous, unregulated heart and expect her to catch him, and she would spend every moment bracing for the impact instead of enjoying the fall. She had seen this pattern before. She had lived this pattern before. Eddie was an intensity bomb with a warm smile and a good laugh, and she knew, with the bone deep certainty of someone who had diagnosed this exact configuration in 100 clients, that he was exactly the kind of person she should not be dating. So there's some good ideas in here. I want to, when I would be revising this, I would want it to show some kind of a balance of attraction that she has for him, but also being put off by the intensity and some more internal reflection on this. So I like that it's kind of including some inner monologue, but I don't like necessarily how it did it. So this would be a spot where I go, okay, going through the flow of the scene, the way the AI wrote out the chapter, I can see in the narrative flow, this is a good spot for inner monologue. I'm going to take that note, but I'm going to put my own spin on the inner monologue with it. Across the table, Eddie had arrived at his own verdict. He watched Tessa eat with the precise, contained movements of someone who had approached dinner the way she approached everything, carefully, methodically, and with awareness of exits. This feels like head hopping. It is head hopping. He was brilliant. She could see that. I haven't seen it do this either. Perceptive in a way that bordered on supernatural, warm when she forgot to be guarded, funny when she let herself be. But every time he got close, every time the conversation found its footing and started to breathe, she retreated behind a wall of clinical language so thick he couldn't find the door. All right, we're gonna cut all of the head hopping that's going on here, which also saves us some words on our word count. The candle between them burned low, its enchanted flame casting soft, shifting patterns on the tablecloth. Neither of them noticed the wax pooling unevenly at the base, or the way the floating mechanism, a minor levitation charm standard in Horizon's upscale dining establishments, had begun to stutter. the flame dipping and wobbling like a drunk trying to maintain dignity. Tessa set her fork down and dabbed her mouth with her napkin. I think the candle tipped. It happened fast. A server passing behind Eddie's chair caught the edge of the table with her hip, a nudge so slight it wouldn't have mattered if the levitation charm hadn't already been failing. The candle listed sideways, touched the tablecloth, and a bright tongue of flame leapt up from the linen with a cheerful, startling whoosh. So I do have some questions about the mechanics of this. If it's levitating, then why would a bump on the table matter? Because it's above the table. So I'm going to need to tweak that a bit. Artemis exploded out of the tote bag. There was no other word for it. One moment the bag was sitting quietly on the booth seat. The next, a black blur of fur and fury launched from its interior with a yowl that cut through the restaurant's ambient ward. It really likes to throw ward in there. Like a knife through silk. Artemis hit the table at full velocity, scattering the bread plate, sending Eddie's water glass skidding, and knocking the salt shaker onto Tessa's lap. Her back arced, her tail tripled in volume, and she hissed. Her back arced, and she hissed at the fire with the righteous outrage of a creature who had spent the entire evening maintaining her composure and finally irrevocably lost it. Not wrong, but I'd say it differently. Every head in the restaurant turned. The elegant woman at the bar looked up from her rows. The string quartet, wherever it was hiding, missed a note. The elegant woman is a detail I was already planning to delete. I'll keep the string quartet, though. Wherever it was hiding, missed a note. Tessa was on her feet before she'd made the conscious decision to stand, her hand reaching for Artemis, her chair scraping back against the floor with a sound that the ambient ward. Again, I don't know what that's supposed to be. Could not smooth, but Eddie moved first, not toward the cat, not away from the fire, but toward the solution. His hand closed around his glass of water in one clean motion, and he upended it over the burning tablecloth with the calm, efficient proficiency of I'm just going to take a look at this whole paragraph. Calm, efficient position of a man who dealt with crises for a living and did not consider a small linen fire to be among the more challenging ones. The water hit the flame died, the whole thing took less than 2 seconds. If it took less than 2 seconds, then that's not as dramatic as what I was looking for a disaster here. The social awkwardness throughout has been on point, but I did want something more comedically horrible to kind of be the final, and we're done here type straw on these proceedings. Smoke curled up from the tablecloth in a thin, acrid ribbon. A small scorched circle marked the linen where the candle had fallen, its edges brown and crisp, still faintly warm. The candle itself lay on the side in a puddle of water and melted wax, its levitation charm thoroughly dead. Tessa stood on one side of the table, Artemis clutched against her chest, the cat's claws hooked into the fabric of her blouse. Eddie stood on the other side, empty glass still in hand, his sleeve damp to the elbow. I don't know how his sleeve is damp to the elbow. All of this for taking a glass of water and pouring it. That does not pass my logic check. Between them, the scorched circle sat like a small, absurd bullseye. They looked at each other. Something almost happened. It was there in the space between them, a flicker, a tremor. Again, 1, 2, 3. The shared recognition of how ridiculous this was, how perfectly, catastrophically absurd the entire evening had been. Eddie's mouth twitched. Tessa felt a laugh building in her chest, pressing against her ribs, and for one suspended moment they were teetering on the edge of it. on the edge of laughter that dissolves pretense and leaves you gasping and defenseless and seen. They both looked away. That needs some work too. Eddie set the water glass down. Tessa loosened her grip on Artemis, who had stopped hissing, but whose tail remained at full volume, a black bottle brush of indignation. The server, who had bumped the table, hovered nearby, mortified, already summoning the manager. Neighboring diners returned to their meals with steady nonchalance of people who would be telling this story tomorrow. Well, Eddie said. Yes, Tessa said. They both stood up at the same time. The synchronicity was almost funny. Two people arriving at an identical conclusion at the identical moment, reaching for their respective jackets with the identical urgency of prisoners who had been told the gate was open. Eddie pulled his jacket from the back of his chair. Tessa scooped up the tote bag and began the process of convincing Artemis to get back inside it, which Artemis resisted with the passive immobility of a cat who decided she was done being luggage. I don't think that's right for Artemis's behavior. I can trim this down. The server appeared at the edge of the table, holding the check folder with both hands. She looked between them with the expression of someone who has been trained for supernatural edge cases but had not been trained for this. Again, it was a tiny hole in the table. It needs to be more dramatic. Whenever you're ready, she said with admirable neutrality. Eddie reached for the check. Tessa reached for the check. Their fingers arrived at the leather folder at the same moments. Now we're doing same moments again. And what followed was a standoff so excruciatingly polite it could have been studied in a graduate seminar on conflict avoidance. I got it, Eddie said. No, please let me. Really, it's fine. I insist. You don't have to. It's no trouble. I asked you to dinner. Cupid arranged the dinner technically. I'd like to. I'm still perfectly happy to. We'll revisit. We'll get to that too, but that's so obvious I'm not going to bold it. They were both holding the check forever now, each gripping one edge, neither pulling, neither releasing, locked in a death spiral of courtesy that showed no signs of resolving itself through any known social mechanism. The server stood at the table's edge, her eyes moving between them with the slow, hopeless tracking of a spectator at a tennis match being played in slow motion. Okay, I actually like that thought, but I could play that up even better. Artemis, who had... Okay, how much do I have to... I have enough. I need to take a short break here. Mother Nature's calling me. I will be right back and we'll keep at this. Give me like 2 minutes. Okay, I'm back. Appreciate everyone's patience while I needed to duck out for a second here. Artemis, all right, we'll carry on. Artemis, who had resisted all attempts to be returned to the tote bag, sat down on the table. She settled herself on the scorched tablecloth with the imperious calm of a creature reclaiming conquered territory. Her tail curled around her paws. Her green eyes moved from Tessa to Eddie and back again. This, she said at a volume calibrated not for Tessa's ears alone, but for the neighboring tables, the server, the bartender, and possibly the invisible string quartet. It is genuinely painful to watch. I think my problem here is at a volume calibrated for not for Tessa's ears alone. This is clearly loud, but that doesn't read as loud enough to me, so I would rephrase things here. The restaurant went quiet, or perhaps it had already been quiet and Tessa only noticed it now, in the ringing aftermath of her familiar's public commentary, as the full weight of the moment settled onto her shoulders like a coat made of embarrassment. Tessa's face flushed hot, a deep spreading heat that started at her collarbones and climbed up to her hairline. Beside her, Eddie's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping near his ear. For one brief, mortifying, oddly clarifying moment, they were united, not in romance, not in connection, not the, again, here's another AIism to be mindful, the not this, but that. Um, I never write that way. So when I see it, I cut it every time because I don't like that phrasing structure. They both looked at Artemis. Artemis looked back at the with the serene satisfaction of a creature who had said exactly what needed to be said and felt no obligation to apologize. Split it, Eddie said, releasing the check folder. Fine, Tessa said, releasing it at the same instant so that it dropped to the table between them. They split the check in silence. The server processed 2 cards with the efficiency of someone who wanted this interaction to end as much as they did. Correct, but I'd phrase it differently. Tessa signed her receipt without looking at the total. Eddie signed his with a pen stroke so decisive it nearly tore the paper. Tessa gathered her things. She picked up the tote bag, held it open, and fixed Artemis with a look that communicated in the wordless shorthand of their bond that getting into the tote bag was not a request. On point but wordy. Artemis held her gaze for a long, insolent moment, then stepped off the table and into the tote with the dignity of a queen entering a carriage she found beneath her. Tessa zipped it shut with more force than the zipper required. It was unzipped in the beginning, so we're not going to zip it now. Well, Eddie said again. He was standing now, jacket on, hands in his pockets, occupying the particular posture of a man who's run out of words and was using his body to say goodbye instead. Thank you for dinner. Just as at half of dinner. Thank you for the other half. Nope. A beat, the space where on a different date someone might have suggested a walk, a drink, a second meeting. The space filled with nothing and everything, with a ghost of a laugh they hadn't. Blah, 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 blah. That'll probably mostly get deleted. Good night, Eddie. Good night, Tessa. They walked out of the restaurant at the same time because, of course, they did. I almost feel like the AI is getting sarcastic at itself for how often they're doing things at the same time. And paused on the sidewalk in the cool horizon night. The city spread out around them, ward-lit streets. It loves wards and charms without any contextual explanation. The distant hum of enchanted transit lines, the mountain skyline, Sharp against a sky full of stars that might have been real and might have been municipal. The air smelled like autumn and added and altitude and the faint ozone tang of active spell work. So I do like that we have some physical descriptions of the city here, but that's a detail I would tweak. Eddie turned left, Tessa turned right. They moved apart with the decisive momentum of two people who made up their minds, their footsteps falling into separate rhythms of the pavement, the distance between them growing with every step. Tessa made it half a block before the exile came along, shaky, pulled from somewhere deep in her ribs. She pressed her hand against the tote bag and felt Artemis shift inside. Don't say it, she whispered. I don't need to. Artemis's voice was muffled by leather and zipper, but perfectly clear. I don't need to. You're already saying it to yourself. Tessa walked faster. The city lights blurred at the edges of her vision. The warm glow of shops, the blue-white flicker of transit wards. If we haven't word, I would ban the word ward. The distant pulse of the entertainment district where charm regulated again. We love our charms. Spilled out in the streets. She was already composing the postmortem, incompatible communication styles, urgency-driven attachment pattern, intensity as a substitute for genuine intimacy, classic anxious, preoccupied presentation with avoidant triggers. I would need to double check our therapy speak to make sure that those sound contextually correct because I am not a therapist. The language came easy, smoothly, each term clicking into place like a lock tumbling shut, sealing the evening away in a box she could label and shelve and never open again, except somewhere beneath the analysis in a place that she had not yet looked and did not intend to look. She kept seeing him grab that water glass, the speed of it, the calm, no panic, no performance, no grand declaration about the preciousness of time, just a hand closing around a glass and solving a problem quietly and completely while she was still getting to her feet. She walked faster. She did not walk back. Now, this conceptually I like because she is recognizing some positive qualities about it, that when something bad happened, he sprang into action. Where I would revisit this is that I think that final kind of last straw, haha, okay, F this, our date is done. That is a thing that I want to dial up more and make that bigger. So once that change has happened, then I would need to come back to this to recontextualize it to the thing that happened, and also kind of dial up things some more here. Because the way I kind of want to leave this is that this scene is from Tessa's point of view. I want her to feel some attraction for Eddie and feel like, this had potential, but she can't even with his hyper intensity and just coming on way too strong and leaving her feel smothered. So I want the date needs to be a disaster plot wise, but we obviously want it to be a disaster in the way where it's like, okay, we can see some glimmers of hope for these people because we do want them, making kissy kissy at the end of the book and on their way to a happily ever after. So we need to have a spark of attraction buried underneath all of their emotional BS. So that is going to be one of the things that I need to make sure gets delivered on here. Okay, so now we've reviewed the chapter. I've highlighted a fair amount of stuff. This was over 6,800 words, I think, initially. Already cut it down to 5,500. I don't know where this one would land or where I would really want it to land because this is a big, important chapter. It needs to be longer and have more going for it. but the word count will be condensed and cut beyond 5,500 here. I probably down into the 4,000 range if I was to hazard a guess. But we've got about 19 minutes left, so we've got some time to dig in here. So starting back from the top of the chapter, so now taking a look at what the AI generated and what I highlighted as areas of opportunity for revision. Now would be the time where I would dig in and start putting my own stamp on this chapter and elevating it from, early rough draft into something that I would consider more readable. Because my own first drafts without AI assistance, I don't consider those particularly readable either. It's all about having something on the page to massage and work with. The host of Lume was exactly the kind of person Tessa had hoped for and dreaded in equal measure, impeccably groomed, warmly professional, and possessed of a diplomatic blindness so finely tuned it could only have been cultivated through years of service in Horizon's dining scene. Impeccably groomed, warmly professional, and okay, I'm thinking like stoic, imperturbed. How is that spelled? I'm going to put unflappable here as a placeholder. That's not really the word I wanted. I have to, but I'm having a vocabulary fail at the moment. So I'm just going to put that there. He glanced at the leather tote bag on Tessa's arm, registered the pair of luminous green eyes blinking at him from the gap in the zipper, and smiled as though he had seen nothing more remarkable than a handbag. He glanced at the leather tote bag on Tessa's arm, clearly registered the pair of luminous green eyes blinking at him in the zipper, and chose to pretend he hadn't seen anything. Table for two under the Cupid reservation. That's me. Tessa adjusted the tote strap on her shoulder. Inside, Artemis shifted, and one black ear poked up through the zipper gap like a periscope. The host led her through the dining room with the practiced grace of a man used to navigating a minefield of floating candles. With the practiced grace of a man used to navigating a... Yeah, I'll leave that. Lume had been designed for intimacy, low ceilings enchanted to mimic a twilight sky, tables spaced far enough apart for privacy, a wine list organized by emotional register rather than grape varietal. This would be the spot where I would mention the ghost. All right, I'm not going to worry about the exact phrasing right now because I kind of want to churn through more than have 15 minutes of me staring at the screen while I try to think through what my optimal phrasings would be. But this is where I would mention the invisible band for the first time. It was objectively a beautiful restaurant. It was also, Tessa thought as she slid into the corner booth, the kind of place that made first dates feel like auditions. Was objectively a beautiful restaurant. Fancier than she would have preferred for a first date. Fancier than she would have preferred for a first date. Honestly. The beauty of the space and Cupid's astronomical satisfaction rating gave the date an air of inevitability before it had even begun. Okay, I would tweak that sentence before, some more, because thinking and writing beautiful prose with a camera on me is still not a skill I have cultivated. But the idea being that the restaurant is beautiful, it's swanky, it's upscale, and all of that. She's already primed to feel that all of this is a bit much before Eddie has even entered the scene. Because the space is gorgeous. Everybody thinks Cupid is the greatest thing ever when it comes to matching people up for romance. So she's already feeling told that she's about to meet her future husband and nothing's happened yet. So the direction I would push that is kind of predisposing her to feel some pressure even before Eddie's arrival. She settled the tote bag on the seat beside her and unzipped it another inch. Artemis's face appeared in the gap, whiskers twitching as she surveyed the room. Don't start, Tessa whispered. I haven't said anything. You're about to. Tessa blinked slowly, the feline equivalent of cracking her knuckles. The candles are floating. The napkins are folded into swans. There is a string quartet playing somewhere that I can hear, but I cannot see. Now, I need to bold that now because I would be trying... I think I want to mention them here. And so I want a comment from Artemis that is not stating the obvious, because if I mention it here, then I clearly don't need Artemis mentioning it here again. But then instead of Artemis mentioning it, I can have Artemis opining about it. This place is trying very hard. It's nice. It's a stage set. Artemis rested her chin on the zipper's teeth. You picked the corner booth so you could watch the door. She didn't pick the booth. I'm just going to delete that. You're 20 minutes early. You've already identified 2 exits and a path to the restroom. I like to be prepared. You like to be fortified. Artemis's green eyes tracked upward and met Tessa's. There's a difference. I think the descripting detail there is fine. You like to anticipate disaster. Oh man, disaster. Disasters that haven't happened yet. It's what you do. Tessa ignored her familiar. She pulled out her phone and opened Eddie's CUPID profile to see what she told herself was the last time. His photo stared back at her, dark eyes, an open smile, the kind of face that looked like it was always in mid-sentence. No, we're going to cut that. She scrolled through his personal statement again, her mind already tagging phrases with invisible sticky notes. I don't believe in wasting time, urgency-driven framing, possible avoidant, anxious oscillation. Life's too short for small talk, boundary-skipping tendency, romanticized directness. I want someone who isn't afraid of depth. Idealization of intensity as intimacy metric. So we've got one, we did the whole 3 thing again, didn't we? 2, 3. Here, it makes more sense to me. I would need to think through, because I think with the asterisks here, I think that would be, I think I would break up each of these into individual paragraphs, is what I would do. I'll dig into those some more. She caught herself and set the phone down. She smoothed her napkin. Now we're gonna, this whole paragraph accomplishes nothing, so I am going to delete that. The front door opened and Eddie walked in. Tessa stuffed her phone into her pocket like she was hiding something naughty and hoped he hadn't noticed. Okay, that's not the exact phrasing I would use either. I'll need to think through a better way to phrase that. But ideally, she's like, it'd be like getting your hand caught in the cookie jar and you're like, oh no, don't see what I'm doing, don't look at me. That's the kind of idea I'm going for. So I'll need to revisit that to kind of make that point better. He paused just inside the entrance, one hand rising to straighten the collar of his jacket, a gesture so automatic it had to be habitual, the kind of thing a person did before walking into rooms where they wanted to be taken seriously. I think we can just leave it at habitual. The host pointed toward the corner booth. Eddie's eyes found Tessa, and his face broke into a smile that was immediate, unguarded, and calibrated to the wattage that suggested he had already decided, somewhere between his apartment and this restaurant, that tonight was going to go well. Tessa's stomach flipped. Her clinical instincts activated simultaneously like a smoke detector triggered by someone lighting a birthday candle. I don't like that. So I think he hasn't opened his mouth yet. He hasn't screwed up yet. This is where we need to see some initial attraction. Immediate, unguarded, and positively radiant. She needed to find I'm probably going to change this too, but she needed to find out who his dentist was. Okay, as in, like, those teeth are so white. Is such a bright smile. Oh my God, he's gorgeous. Her stomach flipped. And her imagination pictured. I can't write with a camera in my face. So I'm just going to gesture at my point. Tessa's stomach flipped and her imagination pictured herself curled up in his arms on a comfy couch with a roaring fire before them. It snow rendered the streets unpassable, so they couldn't go anywhere if they wanted to, so they had nothing to occupy their time but each other. All right, the idea being that he walks in, she thinks he's hot, she's already fantasizing about a life together, and then he opens his mouth and she goes, ah, shit. That's the idea. Eddie reached the table in 6 long strides. Up close, he was taller than his photos suggested, with the slightly rumpled energy of someone who moved through the world at a pace the world hadn't agreed to. He was taller than his photos suggested. Just end of sentence. His jacket was nice, but not new. His shoes were polished. I need to think of a better way to describe clothes. Tessa, he extended his hand. The handshake was warm and firm and lasted exactly 1 second too long. Eddie, it's really nice to meet you. You too. She gestured to the seat across from her. I got here a little early. No, that's great. I appreciate punctuality. Time is. He stopped himself, laughed, and sat down. Sorry, I was about to say something about time being precious, but I promised myself I wouldn't lead with that. Yeah, that's coming on a little too direct even for him. Sorry, my mind drifted to some cliche about time being precious. And he said, okay, we'll leave it here. I'm going to make myself a nice note. This is where I stopped on June 9, editing and revising the text on stream. I was like leaving myself notes on my specific spot as a bookmark so that I can come back to things more quickly. So yeah, progress on this is slow, simply because I take the time to read through things aloud with the audience, explain my thought process on everything, try to explain what I like or don't like and why, how I would change things and why. If I am just sitting here, by myself, no camera, no stream, just jamming on the text, I would be flowing through things a lot faster. But I do like to take my time with this as kind of an educational thought process on, what I like about the text, what needs to be changed, where we at. We cut another 200 words off of this, and I think more will go. So it's trending in the right direction. As I said, I always like having too much to start rather than being short and working on things. But yeah, that is another day, a little bit more progress. So we'll leave it there. And I hope everybody has a great evening. I will catch you on Friday.